Hello everyone, welcome back with another video around fundamentals of programming. So today we'll be talking about exceptions handling in Java. So as you can see here, there are two different broad categories of exceptions, the specific exceptions and the generic exceptions. So specific exceptions are something where you already know upfront the type of exception and you know how to handle those. Some of the examples of those, like I've listed down here, are arithmetic exceptions and error or exception that happens through arithmetic when you're doing an arithmetic operation. It could be a null pointer exception where you didn't initialize a variable, for example, and you end up with a null pointer. If you're dealing with files and the file is not placed in the right location, you would probably can get a file not found exception. The same way, if you're dealing with arrays in Java, and let's say if you are trying to access an element or an index which doesn't exist when you initialize the array. So these sort of exceptions can arise. So one way is to go and then write those specific exception blocks and deal with the exceptions. And the second way is to have a generic catch-all exception block. And the way it will work is it will start with more of a specific exception. And if you don't have any catch block defined for those, it will go to generic one, the catch-all one, and will go and execute that. So let's go to the Eclipse IDE and then try to see how we can implement exceptions and try to handle them. So here we are back again with the Eclipse IDE. So I will start with writing a basic exception handling block. So we typically start with the try catch block. So let me just start with writing it and then we'll explain how it works. So if you can see, I just started the try and a catch. So the way it works is whatever condition or the code that you want to execute, you will write those under the try block. And then if for any reason there are exceptions in those statements, it will go through the catch conditions. So let me just start with a pretty basic one. Let's say we started with creating two different integers, I and j, and then I initialized I with 1 and j with 0. And I am trying to divide let's say I'm using integer k and I'm trying to divide I by j. So if you see as part of this arithmetic operation, it should, since you are doing a divide by 0, it should return an arithmetic exception. So since we right now only have an exception, a generic exception at the bottom, it should go into this block and then I can just go and then write a statement indicating this is a generic exception. So let's run this and see how does this work. So as you can see, uh, like we were talking through, we were trying to do a divide by 0. It results in an exception, and we end up uh, getting into the catch block, and then this statement got printed. So this is an example of generic exception, like I was talking before. Now the question is, if you want to go and then do something different, in case if you got an arithmetic exception, what you can do is you can start with writing multiple catch blocks, and I can even write a catch block for arithmetic exception. So now if you see, I have an arithmetic exception handling catch block, and I also have a generic exception catch block. Now let me just do a statement printing here, and I will just say this as arithmetic exception, just so that we understand the concept. Now, ideally speaking, this should go into the arithmetic exception block and it should print the arithmetic exception. And as you can see, this has printed the arithmetic exception. So this is how you start with a specific. So this is basically a specific of an example of a specific exception, and this is more of a generic exception like I was talking before. So in the same way, you can write multiple exceptions. Like for example, let's say I also want to go and handle null pointer exception. So I can write a block here, the null pointer exception, and I can just go and then put it here as well. And then I can just go call out this as null pointer. Now, one other thing I wanted to show here is, let's say I want to go and then fire this null pointer exception. So for doing this, what I can do is I probably can start the basic string, and then I can start initialize this with a null value. Uh, and then what I can do is I can just go and then try to generate a null pointer exception by trying to print the first character uh, of this string, which is in fact a null. So in this case, if you try to execute, this should go and then return you with a null pointer exception in this case. So I'm just trying to go and then say, uh, give me the first uh, character index value, and then since that value doesn't exist, it should fail. So here, as you can see, it went into the null pointer exception block. That was the first one. So it starts with the first one, the condition met, and it returns. The other thing I wanted to just go and call out here is, if you can see, we have multiple statements, and then you would have exception from each of them. So the thing is, the way try catch works is it starts to execute these conditions in a sequence, and whichever condition fails first, it will go to the catch block. So this condition will never even execute. So as you can see here, we just went through this code, and then you just end up seeing null pointer exception. Now, if I just swap this up and put this on top, you will end up seeing the arithmetic exception, not the other one. So this got just copied. I have to just delete the previous one. So this is how, if you can see, this is how it works. So this is an example. So as part of the best practice of programming, you need to make sure that you are writing your code in a try-catch block, and ideally or preferably you can write your generic exception at the very end, and then you can write your specific exceptions like these two I have provided here. The last thing about exception handling, we talk about try catch. There is another block called finally block, which is again part of the exception handling. And the way it works is uh, anything that you've written in the try catch block will be executed in order. Now, if anything fails, you will get into the catch block, and then the last part, finally block, will always be executed, regardless of whether your code went into the exception path or it went through the happy path. And the reason for putting a finally block as part of best practice is, if you have to do some cleanup, like for example, if you open a connection as part of your try catch block, try block, and then you went into some exceptions, you need to make sure that your connection is closed. So those sort of things you can do the cleanup part in the finally block. So I will just show you how the flow happens, taking both the happy as well as the exception path, and we'll show you that the finally block is always executed. So here in this example where we had an exception, you can see the exception appeared, and then you went into the finally block. Now what I can do here is I can just go and then remove these conditions, and I can just go and then do some initialization. For example, this part, which should never fail. So it should go through try block, and then it will just go to the finally block. So here, if you see, it didn't went into the catch blocks, but it went through the finally block. So this is an example of how you can implement exception handling in your code. So I hope you like the video. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and to do post in comments if you need any specific help, or you want any specific videos on specific topics on Java. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.